Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
When it rains, it pours. That's what it looks like for Houston weather over the next week or so. And it's also an appropriate expression for what's happened on the basketball court with the Rockets over the past couple of weeks. To break it all down, as well as discuss some potential areas for improvement in the games ahead, well, that's what we're going to do today on another new episode of The Lager Line, as always served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. I'm Ben Dubose, your host, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire, and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, co-host, and producer out of Portugal, Paulo Alves, who you can follow on Twitter/X at Paulo Alves NBA. Me, I'm at Ben Dubose. So as we chat on this Friday, January 19th, the Rockets are 1-3 since we last spoke a week ago. And honestly, it's not a huge surprise. For starters, Tari Eason has now missed the last 9 games with his leg injury, and Dylan Brooks recently had his own 9-game absence that overlapped that. So the injuries have not helped, and neither has the schedule. When we recorded last week, we said that last Friday's game at Detroit was almost a must-win because of how difficult the schedule was going to be to close out the road trip, and well, that's pretty much how things played out. Fortunately, Fred VanVleet salvaged a win with some really clutch plays late in Detroit, because the Rockets weren't even close in Boston, Philadelphia, or New York to close out the road trip. And now, as things stand, the Rockets are just 4-15 on the road and 19-21 overall this season. It's their first time being multiple games below 500 since the opening week, and they're currently on the outside looking in as it pertains to the Western Conference play-in tournament. I honestly can't remember the last time Houston wasn't in the top 10 of the West standings. For me, it's pretty jarring to look at. And it makes Saturday's game versus a red-hot Utah team that recently passed the Rockets all the more important. Anyway, as far as what's happened, the slippage in January has objectively occurred on defense. The Rockets allowed over 120 points in 4 of the 5 losses on the road trip, and they're just 17th in net defensive rating this month. For the season as a whole, they're 8th, and they were as high as 2nd when things were really going their way earlier this season. But I'm actually not that worried about the defensive side of the ball. For starters, missing Tari and Dylan for roughly 10 games apiece, that will certainly take a toll. Those are 2 of your best and most versatile defensive players. The defense should bounce back when they have their usual personnel. I also think that's the side of the ball that historically, Ime Udoka is much more proven when it comes to his ability to teach and coach. We should also note that when the Rockets were as high as 2nd overall on defense, a lot of the underlying metrics suggested that they were benefiting from some positive shot luck. We've referenced that in the past, and what that basically means is that teams were missing open shots against the Rockets at a greater rate than they should. Well, January is sort of the opposite. It's honestly tough to shoot against air, as well as the Celtics, the Bulls, and the Sixers did for extended stretches of this road trip. This is the inevitable regression to the mean, and it tends to happen more when you're on the road as well. My personal opinion, I think it evens out, and hopefully it starts to this weekend when the Rockets open up a 3-game homestand. So the bottom line, I don't think the Rockets are as bad as they've looked the last couple of weeks. They should get healthier. Teams probably won't shoot as well against them in Houston. The defense will improve, and my guess is Fred VanVleet also bounces back from his mini slump. But my big picture thought as we open up this show, even if all of that happens, there's still pretty clearly a large gap between the legitimately good NBA teams and the Rockets. And even if the Rockets play more competitively than they have of late, it may not be as drastic of a win-loss turnaround as they need to consistently get back to winning. Because ultimately, it comes down to the offense. Even when they were winning games at a higher level early this season, like those extended winning streaks, the 6 in a row in early to mid-November, the offense, even at that time, was still average to below average. It's just the defense was so elite, again, we're talking second in the league good, that it allowed you to grind out games anyway. I don't think the defense is as bad as the 17th overall figure that the metrics say it is in January. Again, my guess is they get back to where they are for the season as a whole, which currently ranks 8th. I think back half of the top 10 is fair, and that's probably the best they can reasonably do given the current personnel and the fact that they're still trying to play several super young players, including Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore, who are rookies. And the reality is that even an 8th ranked defense, while good, and it's a huge improvement from the last couple of years, that's not enough to consistently win when you have a bottom 10 offense. And even when they were winning, that's what they were. We just overlooked it because the defense was that damn good to where they could grind out wins anyway. For the season overall, they're 21st in offense. In January, they're 22nd. It's barely changed at all. Again, even at their best, it was still below average, still bottom half of the rankings. So in terms of where things go from here, I honestly don't know. I do think the Rockets play better at home. We've seen that time after time, and the defense should improve as they get healthier. That will help them grind out a few wins in ways they couldn't the last couple of weeks. The schedule easing up should help as well. You do have 3 in a row coming up against Portland, Charlotte, and Brooklyn starting next Wednesday. But for now, until something significant changes, like a major trade or one of your young guys taking the leap, I think we've just got to accept that this team is probably mediocre at best, right? I guess my view is that while the defense should bounce back, it's just not realistic to get back to that top 2 elite level from early in the year. That was unsustainable because of the shot luck, the positive shot luck that they had at that time. And without reaching that level, you can't consistently overcome an offense that's been clearly below average all year. So while I don't expect the Rockets to go 1-5 and too many other 6-game stretches, I also have a tough time seeing them suddenly go 5-1 to offset the damage. This feels like a team that, now that we're at the exact halfway point of the season, or will be after Saturday, is basically where they should be at 19-21. And we've just got to accept that for now, that's a pretty fair representation of what they are. Paolo, does that all make sense to you? And what are your general thoughts coming off that terrible road trip?
Yeah, man, it's been pretty rough to watch this team, and if you follow me or anybody that actually watches the games day to day on Twitter, you'll see as much. It's just, and we've talked about this, right? It's just our offense is not good enough to make up for the lapses on defense that you expect from a team as young as the Rockets, right? You can't forget that Ime Udoka sort of worked miracles sort of so far, but at the same time, there was a reason you didn't expect the Rockets to be that good of a defensive team. Alperen Sengun, while improved, is still not, a plus defender or someone who you'd rely on to pull his own weight. He does that on offense, right? Jalen Green, they use him as a chaser, running around screens, trying to get contests up on when guys are wide open, right? He's still not that great of a defender. He still has mental lapses. He's done a better job than we expected, but he's still a shooting guard that's not, some sort of defensive prodigy. And for a long time during the stretch, you didn't have Dylan Brooks, who's now back, and you can totally see the difference with him being back. You don't have Tari Eason, right? And so it was kind of rough to expect the defense to keep up the pace. But as I've said, I think last pod or 2 pods ago, you can't expect the defense to keep up with how bad the offense is. It's everything feels forced, right? And with Tari Eason being out and Dylan Brooks being out for so long, a lot of the easy baskets that you get in transition off of playing good defense are disappearing. And besides that, you're being forced for a long time. You were being forced to play Keishan Tate more and more and more. You add on to that the fact that you're not playing Amin Thompson instead of Aaron Holiday, who was a big part of the rotation while Amin was injured, but is now over the last 4 games has played 4, 6, 9, and 3 minutes when he was, I think, at 18 to 20. He's not a part of the rotation anymore. That's a 39% shooter who's, basically not playing anymore. And that makes everything tougher for Alperen Sengun as well. When you compile on top of that you're playing teams that are for one reason or another perfectly set up to make the Rockets offense even clunkier than it usually is. I mean, the Knicks are an overwhelming team on defense. They'll get physical. They'll make things tough. I mean, if you watched the game last night, at some point I was wondering if we were going to get to 50 before halftime. Both teams.
And neither did.
Did they not?
I think it was 48-46, wasn't it?
It might have been. But anyways, it was 50 in today's NBA is already low.
But it
lower
was
than
bad,
50 is
bottom
even
line.
worse. Yeah, it was really rough to watch. And then you add to the Knicks, you add the Sixers, who were playing with Joel Embiid, who's obviously a defensive monster, and the Sixers themselves are a good defensive team, especially when you look at their coach, Nick Nurse, the guy that gave Toronto that reputation that they have of a really tough playing team. The Celtics, you don't need to go. I mean, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford. You don't need to go much further than that to see how good of a defensive team that can be. You have the one-off, which is the Pistons, and then somehow the Bulls are now a good defensive team. Since Levine went down and now Levine's back, they've managed to stay a good defensive team somehow. But even if you ignore them, the teams before that are the Heat, another great defensive team, great reputation. The Bucks, who are not a good defensive team, but they do have Brook Lopez, and we know how good rim protectors give fits to the Rockets, especially Jalen Green. And you got the Timberwolves, who are, if I'm not mistaken, the best defense in the league, one of the best teams in the league, running Rudy Gobert at the 5. So it's not like the Rockets. This stretch of play, not only are they good teams, they're really good defensive teams. And this stretch came at a point where the Rockets' offense, you thought they couldn't get any worse. Well, they did. And then on defense, they haven't been able to keep up. And as you said, it's just, I'm not even sure I would say it's not sustainable, the level of defense that they were playing before. It's just not sustainable with the level of injuries that the Rockets have had to keep players on that side of the ball. If the injuries, and I'm going to knock on wood, if the injuries were to Jalen Green, for example, the defense wouldn't suffer as much. And you probably, and I know we'll get into Jalen in a little bit, not to shit on him too much, but the defense wouldn't suffer, and the offense might actually not suffer as well at this point, sadly. But if it were Jalen, or if it were one of the rookies, or I mean that's probably it as far as defense goes. You probably wouldn't have felt the difference, but it was two of the key contributors on defense in Tari and Dylan Brooks who were out, right? And so it's just been really rough. And the Rockets have to take advantage of the upcoming stretch of games, because if they don't, then what looked like a surefire play-in season can turn, into we're going to be within 3 or 4 games of the play-in for most of the season. I mean, the Jazz are on a hot streak right now. They're really tough to beat, but the Rockets are playing at home, and so we know how they have to take advantage of every home game because of how much they suck on the road. The Celtics at home, it's going to be a tough team to beat, but I expect us to at least make it a game, especially if Tyrese is back. Hopefully he is. And then you've got the Trailblazers who you have to beat. You can afford to not beat some of these bad teams if you're beating some of the good teams, but the Rockets aren't beating some of the good teams anymore. So you have to beat the Trailblazers, you have to beat the Hornets, you have to beat the Nets, and you have to make it competitive with the Lakers, the Pelicans, and the Raptors before you face the Timberwolves again away, and you're probably going to get blown out on that one. But this stretch of 7-8 games is going to be really key, not only from a record standpoint, but I think from a, not chemistry, but from a morale standpoint, because if this keeps going, it's going to get flimsier and flimsier, and as much as Udoka is a great coach and he's great at making guys buy into the system, you need a level of results for guys to stay believing in that system and stay playing with that level of effort. And we haven't. It's been touch and go for some games, but I'll credit that to the team being young. But if it just falls apart from a morale standpoint, it gets really tough for Udoka to make a team that doesn't really have the defensive personnel to be as good as they are on defense, to stay that good on defense, to be able to keep the offense afloat. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on, that it's been going on Twitter a lot, is a lot of people are talking about the fact that Alfred is not getting used as much, or that his usage is inconsistent, right? So we'll go full quarters where we're using him all the time, and then we'll go, huge stretches where we're not using him at all on offense. And while I do agree, he's by far our best source of offense. You have to take into consideration the fact that, although we are not really sure at this point, but you have to take into consideration that there's possible stamina issues that only the only the team knows about, right? And the other thing that I will mention is that, as I mentioned before, we're playing teams that are absolutely exhausting. And the way Alperen Şengün plays basketball, it's a very physical brand of basketball. There is, a lot of finesse to it. But when it's not working, he is bodying into people and he's hitting tough hook shots and he's really good at them, right? But that has to drain a lot of your energy. The more you go into that system, especially when you're facing teams like the Knicks, who are really rough. Teams like the Heat, teams like the Timberwolves, even the Bulls right now are like that. Right? And I think when the Rockets have tried to go to Şengün, even though it's better than anything else that they're doing, we've seen during the last few games a higher and higher amount of turnovers out of LP, which is to be expected when you're playing really physical defensive teams, and you're being tasked with, carrying an offense this much. So I think it makes sense for the Rockets to try to have some sort of alternate ways of producing offense, because yes, you can go to Şengün the entire game, but that's going to run out at some point, and you're not going to win games, going to him for 48 or 36 minutes a night. So while I do agree, it's sometimes jarring the fact that they go big stretches without going to him. I would also point out that sometimes we go through stretches where we're going to him all the time and it looks beautiful, but you can't expect that to be the case the entire game, at least at this point of his career. And the Rockets aren't going to win if that's the case either, because that's eventually going to there's going to be diminishing returns.
The other factor I would point to with Şengün, I think he's someone who would be disproportionately affected by an off stretch from Fred, which is what we largely saw on the road trip after that brilliant game in Miami. The last 5, he was not quite himself. I know he got going from 3 against the Knicks, but he was a train wreck going to the basket. And because so much of Alp's usage involves the two-man game with Fred, if Fred isn't making defenses respect him, if he's not punishing them when he has his chances, then that's going to make it all the more likely that the opposing defense is going to be very aggressive with Şengün and dare the Fred half of that two-man action to do the damage. And for the most part on this road trip, and honestly for a lot of January after those 2 easy games against the Pistons and Nets to start off the month, it's not been Fred at his best. I'm not worried about him. Again, he has a long track record. He's paid a lot of money for a reason. He did start shooting the ball better against the Knicks, so I feel confident that Fred's going to turn things around. But when he has a down stretch, which he largely has this month, then I think the trickle-down effect, Şengün is a player who disproportionately would be impacted simply because so much of what the Rockets do offensively is built on that two-man foundation. We've said it time and time again this season.
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm not even sure we can expect some sort of rebound from the last few games from Fred, because, listen, he's at 39.4% from 3 for the season. That's, besides his second year where he was scoring 8 points a game, that's the best of his career, right? So I'm not even sure we can expect that, I'll call it progression to the mean to happen, because he's currently overperforming his career stats. And
well, for the season, yeah. I'm just saying, like, you look at some of these games this month, he's had 3 single-digit scoring games, including 2 in a row against the Celtics and Sixers, where he didn't make much of an impact at all. If you're going up against a really good team and Fred's not making any impact offensively, then I don't know what you expect. It's going to be pretty difficult when they can just really try to clamp on Şengün. You know what I mean?
True. No, I agree. I agree with you. It's a two-man game, and if you're denying one side, the other side has to carry the weight. But to be fair to Fred, I will say, I mean, the game against the Knicks, he pulled his weight. He scored 24 on 19 shots, but he had 12
the top
assists
line
to 1
numbers were
turnover.
good.
Right?
It was just a couple, especially in the third quarter, which is when things spiraled on the Rockets. There were a couple of actions where I believe it was Şengün that had the ball up top and Fred made a cut and his layups didn't even hit
The
the
missed
rim.
layups. Yeah.
He was just paranoid about what it looked like to me. At least he was paranoid about his lack of height and the shot potentially getting blocked, and he made it way more difficult than it needed to be. So that's just a little thing, but it's something that needs to be cleaned up if you want to fully unlock the spacing for Şengün and to give him what he needs to operate. Because again, the Rockets are limited overall offensively, and so because of that, there's a very high burden on Fred to sort of make up for what you're not getting at those other spots, most notably Jalen Green.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. I was going to tee it up for you. I mean, we can talk about the two-man game between Fred and Şengün and how important it is, but one of them being off is becomes a lot less important if somebody else on this team starts carrying their own weight, or at least carrying the weight of an
Yeah,
average player at the
and
position.
yeah, and one thing we should point out as a disclaimer before we go into the Jalen analysis, and really it's not just Jalen, it's the entire shooting guard position. I'm sure some will say you're only talking about three players, Fred, Şengün, and Jalen. What about the others? It's a five-man game. The thing is, Dylan Brooks and Jabari Smith Jr. provide you value in a number of areas. They're very good defensively. They can shoot. Dylan's above 40% on threes this year. Jabari is upper 30s. So even though they're not creators, they're not on a consistent basis someone you can give the ball to and potentially relieve some of that pressure on Şengün and Fred. At the same time, the construct of this team doesn't ask them to be. They provide value in other areas. It's the shooting guard spot where there needs to be more relief for the Jalen Fred or for the Şengün Fred two-man game. And Jalen has just been far too inconsistent this season at giving them that relief. And you mentioned the timing earlier. It's very interesting because not only are you entering a stretch where you have more home games and the strength of schedule lightens a bit as well. So you need to stack some wins before things start to pick up again with the difficulty. You're also leading into the final weeks before the February 8th trade deadline and the week-long break in the middle of February for the All-Star game. And because of that, there's a couple of different factors that come into play. For starters, what do the Rockets do at the trade deadline? When we talk about this quest for more offense, which is really hanging over the entire franchise at this point, it's not just this season. At some point, be it a young prospect developing or a marquee acquisition externally, they're going to have to develop or bring in someone to fill that hole if this team ever wants to get to a contending level. So the trade deadline is obviously one opportunity to reshape your roster. Guys get made available across the league. And then, Paolo, you've talked about it in the past. If you were ever going to consider making a change of substance to your starting lineup, your rotations, potentially starting someone in place of Jalen Green, the All-Star break is the time to do it because you have a week to 10 days to really practice, to get used to the new rotations, to give the player a chance to mentally adjust so that you're not doing those things on the fly. And there's a lot of options with Jalen underperforming to the extent that he has. Yes, he's just 21 years old. Yes, it's year 3. It's not time to sell all your Jalen stock and to say he can't turn this around. No, he still can, but we're also deep enough into his career where you can't whistle past the graveyard. You can't ignore that some of these downside scenarios are coming into play because I think we all would have wanted more than this from Jalen when we were outlining our expectations for him going into this third season, which can be pivotal for a young player's development. So, in terms of what the Rockets need out of that spot, which is more consistent scoring, shooting, and playmaking, the trade deadline is one option, but I'm sort of torn because the marquee acquisition that could conceivably plug that hole, I don't think that's going to be on the table, even if the Rockets felt they could get a deal done. We talked a couple of months ago about the hypothetical of Donovan Mitchell. It doesn't seem like Mitchell or anyone of that stature, potentially like a top 15 type player, is going to be on the market at this deadline. That's going to be this offseason at the earliest, and maybe that goes into the next league year. So I don't think the Rockets are going to be able to make an acquisition of that magnitude. You could get more of a stabilizing presence. For example, with the Brooklyn pick improving by the day, it feels like with the Nets having now lost 14 of 17 games, there are definitely scenarios where I think the Rockets could engage the Nets about a Mikal Bridges trade and giving the Nets back some of their draft assets. But that's a high floor, low ceiling move. Mikal Bridges is not going to be the tip of the spear for a contender. He's just going to give you a higher floor than what you're getting from Jalen right now. Another name that the Rockets have been linked to by Mark Stein, Hall of Fame reporter, is Harrison Barnes of the Sacramento Kings. Now, Barnes is not a two guard, he's a forward, but you could conceivably shift Dillon to the two. He's versatile enough defensively that he can still provide a lot of value there, and you can put in Barnes as a high floor guy. He's just 31 years old. I think his game should age pretty well. Every year he's a good shooter, nearly 40% from three. He defends well, high IQ. And so if you plug Jalen's spot with someone like that, and you could argue, I mentioned the Brooklyn pick being a trade asset for Bridges because the Nets would disproportionately benefit from having their picks back and having full control over their future. There's also a case to be made that maybe the Rockets should explore the market for that Brooklyn pick because they have so many young guys already. And if the Rockets don't have a plan to develop whoever they would draft in the top 10 this June, then that asset is just going to depreciate in value as they're just sitting and sort of rotting on your bench. And you already have a lot of young guys. So if you want more veterans to supplement the young core that's already in place, maybe this is the time with the value for that pick rising that you explore a deal that brings in a more proven piece. Even if it's someone older, at the same time, if they're helping you win, at least the value should stay relatively constant when we talk about positioning yourself for that marquee trade down the line. If a Donovan Mitchell, Zion Williamson, someone at that level eventually comes available. So it's not like it all has to happen now. You can set yourself up for moves later. And if you don't have a clear path for your 2024 lottery pick from the Nets to play, then maybe it makes sense to flip it for a more veteran type and just sort of spin your wheels. But the flip side to that scenario is that if you bring in a Harrison Barnes type, and this is just a template because Mark Stein brought up his name the other day, at the same time, you're limiting reps for your internal candidates to develop into that role. Certainly Jalen Green, the chances are not at zero that he can still develop into that type of player. Beyond Jalen, though, you also have Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore. Is it worth a high floor, low ceiling external acquisition in a season you're not going to win a title anyway, if it then caps what you can do with your internal candidates, Jalen, Amen, and Cam, that conceivably could grow and develop into that perimeter playmaker and scorer that you need? It's a complicated question. There's benefits from winning now. We've talked about avoiding the rot of losing, making a team more competitive, making everyone earn the minutes. That's great. But there's also benefits to development and giving guys like Jalen and Amen and Cam every opportunity. And even if the Rockets get to a point that they decide it's just not happening with Jalen this season, then you could at the All-Star break make a change and give even more reps, even a starting role to Cam Whitmore or Amen Thompson if you wanted to. That's an option. So there's a lot of different ways that the Rockets could go to sort of plug that or try to plug that hole. And I guess I'm curious your thoughts, Paolo, on how you would balance those factors, because I don't think there's an easy answer. I mean, I see the appeal to a win now piece, and I do have some concerns about if you keep that 2024 Brooklyn pick, would that asset retain its value if the Rockets aren't really looking to play another young player next season? So perhaps it's the time to explore the market, and that's a clear spot that you could upgrade with a proven win now piece. But the flip side, the type of player that's actually going to fill that hole and give you what you need to eventually be a contender is not going to be on the market this deadline. So is it worth allocating more minutes for someone in that tier, or should you either continue to give Jalen reps or eventually give those to Amen or Cam because of the higher ceiling? What's your thought on sort of balancing those together as the Rockets head towards the back half of this season?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways you can go about it. I think it can be a multiple step process in the sense that first of all, I don't think a man at the 2 with the starting lineup is the answer at all. You're going to have a lot of the same problems you have with Jalen as far as the spacing goes, but he'll be even less respected of a shooter. It will cramp spacing even more, and even scoring inside. A man is probably better than Jalen, but he's not good enough yet. I think offensively he's too raw, and I'd rather him getting the reps he's getting with the second unit. So, I mean, I'm just not considering it all for a starting spot. Cam, you could Cam being more versatile and being a shooter, essentially, it would make sense to, before you make a move, give Cam a month starting. And you don't even have to start and play 30 minutes, which segues perfectly to my second point, which is Jalen can play. The two options aren't Jalen at 30 plus minutes a night or trading Jalen. You can play Jalen 20 minutes a night off the bench. He's not playing better than that. He's not playing well enough to get better than that. And so even if you bring someone in, you can still play Jalen 20 minutes a night, let it be 20 minutes. So maybe that helps. Maybe, I mean, we have no idea how to get Jalen going, so maybe that helps. And you don't even have to increase amends or Cam Whitmore's minutes this season in order to justify having them with the main team. So what I mean by that is it's not as if you bring someone in and now you're doing your prospects a disservice this season. I also think that Amen is more than one season away from being a starter level player. He does a lot of things well, but his weaknesses, as we all know, are very defined and bring very specific problems. Unless he's handling the ball right when playing off the ball, he can create extra possessions. He's a good defensive player, right? He's a good rebounder, but struggling to score, which is something that he has right now, especially when jump shooting, is a very defined problem that teams are going to exploit. So I think I wouldn't project a man to be a star level player, not this season, not even next season, more likely than not, unless we experience a Jabari Smith type of leap in his play. So I'm perfectly happy having him play the 16 to 20 minutes a night that he currently plays off the bench with that unit.
And one thing I want to throw in very quickly, I know some will say, what about Tari Eason? Because the Rockets close games in December with Tari in place of Jalen. My guess is that the rest of the way, you're going to see Tari limited to about 25 minutes per game. The fact that we've now had a full-blown recurrence, he's been out for more than 2 weeks, basically matching the absence he had from the preseason into the start of the regular season. That tells you that stress reaction, it's a real issue. And with only 3 months left, and it's not a season in which you're really trying to win a championship anyway, I doubt the Rockets really try to push him on that. So Tari, while his return will help you, I don't think you're all of a sudden going to have this option to play Tari 35 minutes per night and plug him in at starters level minutes. My guess is when he does return for the rest of this way, they're going to be managing that leg a little bit, limiting him to 25, 27 minutes per game. And then any bigger role than that would not happen until, this offseason and building into next season.
Yeah, and so as I was saying, you can subtract minutes from Jalen. He doesn't have to play 30 or nothing. You can subtract minutes from Tate. I think Tate can just be out of the rotation. You can do all of these things and still give a man 16 to 20, give Cam 16 to 20, give Jalen 20 minutes a night. And the other thing that you can do is you can stop playing Fred VanVleet 40 minutes a night. Right?
Okay,
I don't know.
fair.
I don't know how sustainable that is, and I know you're trying to win, but we're working under the supposition that we're going to go and get a player that's going to help us win. So you're not exactly taking the minutes away from Fred and giving them to someone who's not going to contribute to winning as much, maybe a man or Jalen or whoever it is. You're taking those minutes and you're giving them to someone else who you're bringing in because you expect them to be good enough right now. So I think you can manage the minutes well enough if there's we have a lot of young players, but there's enough guys on the edges that you can cut minutes from. You can cut 10 minutes away from Jalen. You can cut 16 minutes that Keshante already plays every night. You can decrease Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet from nearly 40 to 35 or 33 to 35. You can get a lot of minutes that way. So I'm confident that finding playing time for these guys is not going to be an issue. You can also just not play Aaron Holiday. You can also just not play Reggie Bullock at all, and you'll eventually you can get there, right? The other thing that I'll mention is it depends on who you're targeting, right? I don't think Harrison Barnes makes sense at all. He's not going to fix your scoring. He's going to be a better floor spacer, but at this point in his career, this is not face up type of Harrison Barnes. This is going to be a guy that's going to space the floor, trying to play some defense, and that's what he's going to be. I think he's 32 at this point. He doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to go and get a guy like that. It also doesn't make sense to me to go and get a guy like Evan Fournier or someone who's going to take and play at the shooting guard position. That's going to be good right now, but is not a part of your future at all. So to me, it makes sense if you're to go get someone to play the shooting guard position. If you're going to go and get a guy like Quentin Grimes, for example, someone who can be both things, someone who you can project to have a role with the team, even if it's not starting right now, you can project them to have a role with the team later. Someone who's on the younger side, someone who spaces the floor and plays defense, right? To me, that's something that makes sense. And the fact that he's available, I don't know what the price would be. I don't know if it would reach a first-round pick. I don't know what the Knicks are exactly looking for, but that's someone that I would be really interested in because it
Would you
feels
potentially move the Brooklyn pick this year, given the considerations I just laid out?
I'd need more than just Quentin Grimes, especially because it seems like the Knicks don't have a lot of leverage because he doesn't want to be there.
Well, yeah. Although one option with the Knicks, they do have a decent stockpile of
Yeah.
future picks,
No,
so
but
they
there's-
could add in, a pick with some protections, which could still be useful to sort of help you get around Stepien in future years.
I was gonna actually propose something different. They have pick 17 right now, and so if you
Ooh,
did pick
okay.
8 for 17 and Grimes, now maybe that makes sense, and then
A
you reach the
swap.
draft.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then moving 17 at the time of the draft is probably more justifiable for a team whose last resort in draft is drafting a guy, because I think if you had to split the probabilities, I would say there's a 60% chance that the pick gets traded that the Rockets trade completely out of the draft. There's a 30% chance that the Rockets trade back or trade it for a vet, and there's a 10% chance that they actually make a pick at number 8 or whatever it may be at the time. So to me, it would make sense, and you can even make it. You can even construct it in the manner of, for example, if you could still make it protected even though it's broken pick. So you could protect the top 4 in case they win the lottery, and the Knicks probably wouldn't mind that because that's not the upside that they're looking for in the trade for Grimes. And if it lands in that range, they get a swap later down the line with the Brooklyn pick or with the Rockets pick, because the Rockets are still going to be projected to not be as good, or at least the Nets won't be as good as the Knicks. But you could get creative with that.
Yeah.
But the overall point being that just trading for a vet that you're going to discard at the end of the season, or that's old enough that it doesn't help you moving forward, doesn't really make sense, because, as I said, we're not yet at the point where we should be burning assets to buy wins. And if it's not something that you're confident that you can resell later on, or you're confident, or someone that you're confident that can grow with the team, if it costs more or the equivalent of a first round pick, to me, it still doesn't make sense. I would rather just exhaust all of your possibilities in house. Just give Cam Whitmore the 30 minutes a night. Play Dylan Tari Jabari. You can get creative with that. And if it doesn't work, it is still, in my opinion, better to finish the season off with Jalen Green starting, as bad as he's been. And we haven't really gotten into how bad he's been. To me, that's still better than getting a guy like Evan Fournier or Colin Sexton or someone like that that's going to come in and make sense for this year, but could very well not make sense for next year. The guy like Quentin Grimes, not only is he young and can grow with the team, even though he's already good, he can fit into multiple roles. He can come off the bench, he can start, he can play, he can probably play the 3 if you wanted him to. So he's flexible enough that, and he probably have, resell value later down the line. So to me, a move like that makes sense. To me, if you're going to go get a vet just to be a rental or something like that, I'd limit the price to a second round pick or 2. And I'd probably do it at the backup 5 position, not at the 2, because at the backup 5, you're not getting in anybody's way. And there's very little
Right.
downside, and you're not really losing anything by getting a guy to play that role. It's just going to move Jeff Green up a position or down a position. At the shooting guard spot, while it has more impact on the game because it's a starter, you're basically wasting time with them. And as we've talked about ad nauseum on the podcast, it's not a pure win now season. It's a win now to make it easier for us to win later as well. It's about that
Right.
experience, and unless a guy like, I mean, I'm not even sure Donovan Mitchell is one of those guys, but unless you find a trade that you really like, I'm not sure moving Jalen Green at this point, as frustrating as he is, and as much as I may say, if you caught me during a game, I may say the opposite, but with a colder head, I'd probably say that it's not worth it to move him unless it's a certain situation where it's a guy that a guy at a higher level than what Quentin Grimes is, but that fills a lot of the same caveats that I mentioned before, as far as how much of a part of a team he can be going into the future. One guy that I would mention that I'm sure is not available, but I would give a lot up to have on this team that would be a perfect fit, would be Desmond Bane, who's currently hurt for 6 weeks in the
Oh, I agree. That'd be
Grizzlies.
good.
He's like in a league. This is a bit of a tangent, but in a league that's really struggling with the shooting guard position, in my opinion. Guys very quickly transition from having a lot of upside to busting or being just offensive players. So you have two routes. You have the Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine route, and you have what's looking like the Jalen Green route at this point, which is just not being a positive player at all. If you think
Wow.
about, yeah,
By
it's
the
just the
way,
truth.
well, I know on Jalen, it's so frustrating. We don't need to go into a Jalen tangent here. We've had enough of those, and some of the issues like the turnovers, the decision making, the strength, the weekends, those are things that at this point, I don't think it's reasonable to expect a huge jump this season. Those are things that would have to be tabled until the offseason and next year at the earliest, if they ever happen. But the shooting, how typical is it in this maddening season for Jalen that a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the big jump that he had in his recent three-point shooting, and that if he could just be an upper 30s to low 40s three-point guy, even if the other areas didn't come along, that could still provide so much value. And since we had all that hope, we talked about, I saw Nathan Fogg pointing to the work that Ben Sullivan had done on his form and tweaking it, and the results did seem good for, I want to say, about 3 weeks. And in the 7 games since, he's shooting 21% from three. How fitting is that when you finally think there's a little bit of progress, there it goes, and all of a sudden it's like we're back to square one.
Yeah, but that's the story with him. It's always been like that. It's just stretches of you think something may be developing, and then just complete inconsistency to the point where he can't put up a complete game. I don't remember the last time he put up a complete game. He's either scoring a lot because he's hot from free, or he's getting to the free throw line, or he's finishing at the rim, but never the three at the same time. He has good defensive games where he sucks on offense. He has good offensive games where he sucks on defense. And even the progress that we thought he had made playmaking wise, we're seeing that it's just a lot of telegraph stuff. The 2-man game without Branching that looked so good, it wasn't actually him reading the defense. It was him predetermining that that's what he was going to do, because when teams started denying that, he didn't know what to do anymore. And so even the supposed playmaking jump isn't really there, and he'll have some games where he'll make the skip pass to the corner. But he's had those games during the first 2 years of his career as well. I distinctly remember a game against the Denver Nuggets where we were missing KPJ or something like that, where he had like 7 assists and he made like a flurry of different types of reads, and we all got excited and to see if this was something that he could sustain. But that's the thing with him. Listen, I'm the biggest as far as Rockets content creators go. I'm probably the biggest Jalen Green fan that's out there. I've been the one that's held on to Jalen Green, that's been in Jalen Green Island for the longest time. I'm probably the last one to leave or close to it, but it's reached the point where it's really hard to even hold on to anything as a silver lining, because every single silver lining that we've had throughout time has proven to be a fluke.
Right. Yeah.
It's not.
I said
yeah, go
I
ahead.
said I didn't want us to go on a Jalen Green tangent, and there we went. One other name I wanted to throw out you on the trade front, and I can't remember if you already mentioned him, but Malcolm Brogdon. I know I think he's a year younger than Harrison Barnes, but it's sort of the same template, a guy who's 30, 31 and, not on the downhill just yet, but potentially is at or near his prime right now. And, 3-4 years from now is probably going to be starting his descent. But he's someone who, unlike Harrison Barnes, they both shoot about 40% from three, which has a lot of value. This Rockets team needs shooting, at a bare minimum, at least have that Jalen spot to help space the floor for Şengün and Fred and help the offense that way. With Brogdon, there is the ball handling, a little bit of playmaking that could potentially, lower the minutes a tad. For Fred, as you mentioned, could be very viable and helpful. And he just fills, while the skill set is not too dissimilar, 3 and D to Harrison Barnes, the fact that he does it at the guard spots might have a little bit more value for this team. And then you could slide him in Thompson into the more, off-ball wing minutes as he's developing his handle. Do you have any additional interest in Brogdon, who would be signed through not just this season, but next year as well?
Yeah, the thing with Brogdon is, well, two things. First of all, he's having a career low season, and this may be because of the system that he's playing in. I mean, nobody wants to be playing in Portland right now, but he's shooting a career low from 2, which makes me think that his efficiency is largely being held up by the fact that he's shooting 41% from 3 for the season. He's also 31. He has a really rough injury history. And he does have an extra year on his contract. I think he's under contract for next season as well. He could make sense, right? If nothing else, because of the added bonus of having a salary next year and helping the Rockets carry on the Oladipo salary into next season, which I think is very, very valuable, and the Rockets should take into consideration when making a trade. The thing is, he's going to cost a first-round pick. And if I'm going to, as we said before, if I'm going to spend the first round pick, it better be someone who I can expect to be here or get the first round pick back at a later date. And even if I don't think I think he'd cost a first round pick right now for sure, because he's playing well, and he's on a bad team, and they have all the patience in the world to hold out for a first round pick.
So it sort of sounds like you look at Brogdon, even though he's a different player in terms of age, it's sort of the same value calculus as Grimes, in that if maybe you could get a swap and still retain a first round pick, maybe you consider it, but he's not at the tier to which you would move that Brooklyn pick, even in a weak 2024 draft. He's just not the tier that would justify moving the pick for the player and not getting anything with the player. It's the same value equation pretty much.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and I'd subtract from that the fact that I highly doubt that at the next that is a very high risk that at next year's deadline, which is when you would have to sell him unless you're planning on extending him past that, which at that point you're kind of talking about him and Thompson's role and everything that comes into play. I don't think at next year's deadline you could regain a first round pick from him, and so if you're not going to get longer term value than that, then I'd want a way to cash out. And I think Brogdon right now is a buy high kind of guy. So as a team that's not trying to win right now, buying buy high type of guys is usually not a good idea, because we don't have the urgency to justify the cost.
Exactly. And there's a story out Thursday night from Jonathan Fagan of the Chronicle saying exactly that the Rockets now at 19 and 21, it's still value over need. Even though they're more competitive, they're not to the point now where you splurge and say, because this need is so glaring, we're going to make it happen no matter what. No, it's make it happen, help your team within reason, within parameters that don't compromise your long-term team building ability all that much. And so that may take some of these, sell high guys like Brogdon off the table, simply because some other team is probably going to be willing to bid a bit more. I think that's fair. I just want to make sure we mention him, because I think from a position standpoint, he's a little more viable than Harrison Barnes is. And like Barnes, he does shoot very well. He at least provides the shooting to space the floor. Could also, again, because of the position, spell Fred a little bit, allow you to dial down his minutes and usage. So I could see some interest, but I agree with you. It's probably not likely, simply because there's going to be some team that's willing to bid a little bit more, that's closer to winning than the Rockets currently are. I just don't think you can totally dismiss it, because on paper, he does check a lot of boxes. By the way,
let me give you just a quick example of someone who would fit, because I'm posing a lot of problems that aren't giving you a lot of solutions, right? Someone who would fit the bill would be someone like, and we are rumored to be interested in Daniel Gafford from the Wizards fits the bill in the sense that he's he's young-ish, and he doesn't play the position that we're talking about at shooting guard. But an equivalent for the shooting guard position would probably be someone like Landry Shamet, who actually plays for the same team, funnily enough. But in the sense that Gafford has resale value because he's cost controlled at a decent price for the role that he plays through not just next season but the season afterwards. And so if you reach a point where you're not getting enough value from him, you could resell him at a later date, or if not, he's at a low enough price that you could justify having him just as a backup center for the foreseeable future. You could even extend them at a later date, right? So you'd be buying a guy that's a block for the long term. With Shamet, he's probably not a block for the long term, but he'd be cheap enough that it would make sense that you could easily plug him into the starting lineup right now because of what he brings over Jalen Green, but easily plug him out of it next year if we make any major moves, because he's not exactly a high maintenance guy.
Yeah. I like that you threw out an example because, for the most part, we have sort of downplayed some of these possibilities. And should also point out that it's not like we're trying to overlook the backup center search. It's just in this episode, we're talking about both short-term and long-term, how to fix the offensive problems. And while a backup center might help you a little bit, if it's a lob threat, that might make it a little easier for some of your perimeter guys, it's not going to dramatically fix this problem that we've been talking about. So the backup center search, while I think for a lot of reasons that's probably the most likely route for the Rockets to go at the trade deadline, I don't think it really speaks to this problem on the offensive side. That's going to help you with defense, with rim protection, with rebounding. But in terms of getting what's been a bottom 10 offense all year to an average or better level, that's either going to take development or acquisitions on the offensive side that fill that role a lot more than the backup center would. We'll see if the value equation matches up. Again, Jonathan Fagan's reporting in the Houston Chronicle indicates that Rafael Stone will be cautious, as he should be, for the reasons you've laid out. But it's an interesting time because you made a good case, I thought, for why you can do both, in that you can still have some minutes for all three of your internal prospects that you want to take the leap, Jalen, Amin, and Cam. And if you got to prioritize, maybe put Amin slightly towards the back simply because he looks so far away at this particular point in time. And if you do that, then you can still carve out at least some role for an external acquisition that could help you plug that hole to an extent in the short term. All right, I think we've covered all the ground I wanted to today. Last topic I wanted to get to before we close out, and this will be short. I just want to underscore how important this game Saturday is against the Jazz. You touched on it briefly earlier, but the Rockets have lost their last three. They're coming off a 1-5 road trip. Jazz have won 6 in a row. They're playing the Thunder as we record, so we'll see what the result of that game is. But regardless, the Jazz will either be 22-21 or 23-20. They're above 500. Rockets now multiple games below 500 for the first time since the opening week. The way the standings are shaping out, unless there's something massive from an injury standpoint or a huge trade that dramatically changes the balance of power, it looks like between the Rockets, Jazz, Lakers, and Warriors, 2 of those teams are going to have play-in spots and 2 aren't. And if you're already multiple games behind, when we look at distance above and below 500, if you're multiple games behind the Jazz and you lose a home game, which is where the Rockets have been disproportionately good this season, and one in which the scheduling factors benefit you. They haven't played since Wednesday, so they will be rested. If you can't win that game, and oh, by the way, you'd have Boston looming on night 2 of a back-to-back the next night, which would potentially be a 5-game losing streak. It's certainly not season is over. Again, half the year is still left. There's a lot of different things that could happen, but Saturday night against Utah is not just a normal game. That's one that, while not must win, if you want to be serious about this play-in push, they need to win that game, and I would expect Ime Udoka to sort of toss the kitchen sink at it from a minutes and rotation perspective, right?
Yeah, I think, as I said, just not only from just the schedule standpoint or the teams that we're playing, from a morale standpoint, it's really important for us to kind of, even the playing field as far as our record goes. And as far as you said about 2 teams being in and 2 teams being out, listen, it's going to be a really tough decision that I'm going to have to make for you, but I think I'm going to go with the Lakers and the Warriors staying out, and the Jazz and the Rockets getting in.
I can't believe you did that.
Just a personal, preference, right? And I thought I was about to get hyped. I thought you were going to say we're going to close out and talk about the Texans, but I guess not today.
Well, we can say go Texans, but boy, it's going to be rough in Baltimore. And who
No, it's
knows if
not. It's an easy win.
it's an easy win against a team
They
that
get
grays out as one of the best in
yeah.
NFL
Their
history.
best. Their best. Listen, I trust CJ Stroud to play no matter how much pressure is. I mean, as long as we give him 2.5 seconds to throw the ball. I mean, I'm not worried about how he reacts to the pressure from the defensive line. I'm worried about the guys getting open behind him and how
Yeah.
hard they guard Nico Collins. Because as long as he has guys to throw to, I trust CJ to make the throws.
Yeah.
And we just learned that their best cornerback is out for the game, right? So
Yeah.
nothing to worry about. Five
Well, and you
touchdown game.
can rightfully point out that the Ravens have underachieved in January in the Lamar Jackson era. The closest parallel is when they were the 1 seed against the 6 seeded Titans in 2019, and they lost, or January 2020, the 2019 season. And Houston fans will remember it well because not only did the Ravens lose that game, they got blown out. It was a Saturday night game. Derrick Henry just went nuts on them. And that was when, so you weren't a Texans fan yet, but the following day, the Texans played at Kansas City, got out to a 24-0 lead. And if the Texans had won that game, not only would they have advanced to their first AFC championship game, but because the Ravens had been upset, the Texans would have hosted the AFC championship game against the measly 6 seeded former Oilers. And of course, the Chiefs came roaring back from that 24-0 deficit. That was basically the end of the Deshaun Watson, Bill O'Brien era. And it led to a lot of pain. Although fortunately that pain was worth it because they're in a better place with a better foundation now. But the bottom line, the reason I bring it up, yeah, there is precedent for the Ravens on a Saturday night as a top seed choking in this spot. They've done it before.
Listen, from what I understand, CJ Stroud is a break with the entirety of Texans history. I mean, I can remember the game against the Titans without CJ, right? But his aura is still in the building, where everybody was saying, "Oh, if this was the old Texans, we'd lose that game because it was a really important game." The first one against the Titans,
Yeah.
the one Case Keenum won, that Dalton Schultz had that insane rip away catch or whatever it was, and
Yep.
then you had the Colts game, which was basically a must win, and then you had the game against the Browns, right? And so I'm expecting this to be a complete break with the entire Texan stigma beforehand. Yeah. And listen, imagine, and I know this is kind of a bogus argument because the NFL would be hype as hell if it were Lamar Jackson versus Mahomes. But imagine I need to see CJ Stroud play against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs in his first year. It needs to happen. Even if we lose, it needs to happen.
True.
So listen, it's meant to be, right? And it's just I've watched 1.5 seasons, or 2 seasons. I'll call it just 2.5 seasons of the NFL, and it seems like more than in any other sport that I've ever watched, teams getting hot or getting cold and morale plays a much bigger factor than in any other sport that I've watched. Like, teams go on runs and they look unbeatable,
Yeah.
and then when they're in a bad run, they look like complete garbage. I mean, look at how the Eagles looked last week, and look at how the Bills look after looking rough for a stretch of the season. Look at how the Texans look. Look at how the Packers look. It seems like momentum is very much a huge deal, and I don't think there's any team in the league right now with more momentum than the Texans.
I will say they have not played as well on the road for a lot of this season, but their last road game was in Indianapolis with everything on the line, and they got it done then. So it's possible.
And they're I mean, supposedly, listen, I don't know a lot about football, but I'm trying to pick it up. Supposedly the Ravens are like a really heavily run reliant offense, and the Texans defense is supposed to be the best. Not the best, but their best trait is stopping the run, right? I heard the stat about their defensive backs being some of the best at tackling runners. And so if they can stop the run and force Lamar to be a passer, then you still have one of the best corners in the league in Stingley that you can put on Flowers. I don't know if Mark Andrews is playing, but I'm not seeing a lot of avenues here.
Yeah, well, it's a different style of running attack because obviously they use Lamar a lot. It's not like a typical running attack where it's through the running back all the time, which is where the Texans have stood up so well this season. But it's not like they've been just gashed by every mobile quarterback they face. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility they play well.
It's the
Look,
opposite. They get destroyed by the random run from Will Levis or Baker Mayfield
Well,
or whatever it is. We almost get the sack, and then they somehow slip. Oh, it's really frustrating.
although Levis is actually a pretty good runner, but I know what you mean. Yeah, it's the random guys that do it more than the guys who are known for it on the scouting report. Anyway, we need to wrap this up, but the positive note I'll leave everyone on is that the Texans have nothing to lose in this game. And so there's a case that the Ravens are going to be the team that's tight. And also, I think that all respect to Baltimore, who, as I mentioned earlier, grades out analytically, according to a lot of models that I follow, as one of the most dominant teams in the modern era. But you talk about momentum. It's basically been 3 weeks since they played a competitive game because they played all backups last week of the year. They'd clinched the 1 seed, and then they had wildcard weekend off as the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. So if you're going to have to play a team that's that great on paper, I think you would want to do it when you come in hot and they come in perhaps a little bit rusty after not playing, as opposed to next week. I know some people said, oh, why can't you just get to the AFC Championship game and at least get that monkey off your back? Yeah, you've got CJ Stroud. I think the Texans, be it this year or in the future, they're going to get to AFC Championship games and beyond. CJ is that special. In terms of this year, if you're in the final 8, anything is on the table. Even if it's unlikely, yeah, you can get to Super Bowl, you can win the whole damn thing. Unlikely, sure, but it's possible. And so if you're going to go through the Ravens, give them to me as early as possible so that maybe the rest versus Russ continuum, that never-ending argument goes in your favor. Not saying it for sure will, but that's a path. And let's be optimistic because bottom line, Saturday is going to be a big day. Texans Ravens at 3:30 Houston time. And then shortly after it ends, 7 o'clock, that big Rockets Jazz game, which is huge for standing reasons for the Rockets to get off this 3-game losing streak, all the bad vibes from the 1-5 road trip. If you beat a Utah team that you're in direct competition with for a play-in tournament spot, that would, while not erase the road trip, it would go a long way towards getting the vibes back where they need to be at Toyota Center. All right, with that, we will bring this one to a close. As always, I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. If you want more content before our next episode, the best place to get it is on Twitter/X, where Paolo is on there at PaoloAlvesNBA. I'm on there at Ben Dubose, and the show is on there at The Logger Line. If you go to twitter.com/The Logger Line and hit the link tree in the bio, you can find links to everything you need. Us, as well as all the partners, sponsors, and friends of the program, Sports Talk 790, Carbach Brewing, who am I forgetting? Oh, USA Today's The Rockets Wire. Access their content along with our distributors, Apple, Google, Spotify. Subscribe, leave a positive review. Check out the content of our friends, partners, and sponsors. Everything you can do to support the program and us is available at the link tree, which you can find simply by going to twitter.com/The Logger Line and hitting up that link tree in the bio. All right, with those plugs complete, we will adjourn. For Paolo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.